Hey guys, and welcome back to me rinsing Jeffree Star's name in every title for views. So today's video is going to be the 6th installment in my Everything Wrong With series, and today we're going to be focusing on Jeffree Star Cosmetics. So quick clarification now, we're talking about Jeffree Star Cosmetics the brand, not Jeffree Star the person, so I'm not going to talk about any of his personal controversies unless they are like explicitly relevant to something that's happened with the brand. So I'm not going to be talking about him as a person, but if you did want to see a video about Jeffree Star the person, we could maybe do that. I would just need you guys to let me know that that's something that you're interested in. So before we start, if you do enjoy the video, then be sure to leave a like, as that massively helps me out, and you can always subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Okay, so first we're going to go over a little bit of background about the brand, their kind of rise to fame, etc. And a lot of the controversies I'm going to talk about occurred in the last kind of 2 years, so I'm going to do like background up until like early 2018, and then we'll go from there. So Jeffree Star Cosmetics is a makeup brand that was founded in 2013 when Jeffree Star gave up a music career and put what he calls his entire life savings into making 3 liquid lipstick colours. And the brand is co-owned by Jeffree and by a guy called Jeff Cohen, who was an early investor, and they launched their first 3 lipsticks in 2014. For 2 years the brand focused on expanding its liquid lipstick line, and they became known for their crazy colours and their kind of out there concepts when it was a time in makeup where most people were focusing on neutrals. This was when the Urban Decay Naked palette had a grip on society, so there wasn't a lot of people doing kind of crazy out there stuff. So Jeffree Star Cosmetics essentially established itself as the place to go if you wanted a lipstick outside the realm of brown, nude, pink or red. And the brand actually launched its first palette in 2016 with the Beauty Killer palette, which it wasn't anything particularly special at the time. It wasn't a massive launch, it didn't have like a lot of hype surrounding it, and it went under the radar a little bit. I think it kind of got average reviews, it had average hype, so it didn't go like huge. And they then launched a second palette, the Androgyny palette, in 2017, which again was a fairly substandard launch compared to what the brand probably hoped for. So the formulas on these first 2 palettes weren't the best according to reviews, but tides started to turn in 2018 with the Blood Sugar launch. So just to note as well, the brand was also consistently expanding their liquid lipstick line, and they'd also conceptualized these skin frosts by this point. So even though the eyeshadow palettes didn't perform the best, people were still very hyped about the liquid lipstick formula and the Skin Frost formula. The brand was establishing its prominence in the sectors of highlighters and lipstick, and it just hadn't quite found its feet in eyeshadow yet, but like I said, people really liked the other products, so were willing to wait for a good eyeshadow formula. So Blood Sugar was arguably the big break that the brand had probably been hoping for. The collection was absolutely massive, everyone was talking about it, everyone wanted it. People who had no idea who Jeffree Star was buying it, because as obviously a kind of beauty guru celebrity makeup line, a lot of Jeffree Star Cosmetics customers were Jeffree Star fans, but this was the first launch that kind of expanded outside of that. And all the reviews that were coming in about this palette were positive. People seemed to love it. And 2018 was probably the biggest year in terms of growth for the brand, maybe 2019, but probably 2018. They went on to launch the Thirsty and Alien palettes later on that year, alongside a new Supreme Frost formula, and started to sell products in Morphe stores, which meant that you could get Jeffree Star Cosmetics now in the EU and on the east coast of America, where previously it had just been central and west coast, I think. And 2019 was onwards and upwards with the release of the Blue Blood palette, the sister to Blood Sugar, in March of 2019, which went absolutely massive, potentially even bigger than the original palette. And overall this launch was, as far as we know, massively successful. And I still find it baffling that so many people were interested in buying a blue and nude eyeshadow palette and lipstick vault, but maybe I'm just not interesting enough with my makeup choices. Okay, so that's where I'm going to leave it for now in terms of general background, so let's get into why you're actually here, which is drama. Jeffree Star Cosmetics had a pretty good run up until Blue Blood, although there was one lawsuit that is worth a mention. So the brand collaborated with Manny MUA in 2017 on a Skin Frost shade and 2 liquid lipsticks, which were released with a similar logo to the one that Manny had used for his collection with Makeup Geek, only this one incorporated the Jeffree Star logo as well. And the pair were the subject of a lawsuit by an indie brand called Black Moon Cosmetics, who had been using a very similar logo since 2015, so 2 years prior to this collaboration. And I will put an image of the two logos next to each other up on the screen, so you can decide whether you think it was a deliberate copyright infringement or not. And in an article that I found from 2017, the authors stated that Black Moon were using Instagram comments as evidence that people were seeing similarities, because there were a lot of comments where people were saying like, oh, did you steal this from Black Moon, or I thought this was Black Moon at first, etc. So they used that as evidence that people were thinking that this was one of their products when it wasn't. And the lawsuit never actually made it to court, and it was settled privately, so I would assume they made a settlement payment because it was a limited edition collection, so they didn't really need to pay for the rights to use that logo for very long. So I would guess they paid a settlement sum to Black Moon for the use of that logo for the one-off product, and then they ended the litigation there. Obviously I can't tell you whether this is correct or not. I don't have access to the documents from this case, and if it is what happened, I couldn't tell you how much they paid them for it. So, okay, so now we've got that out of the way, we can jump back into 2019, where Jeffree Star Cosmetics was on its biggest growth curve yet when disaster allegedly struck. So on April 2nd, 2019, Jeffree Star posted a YouTube video detailing how the brand's warehouse had been broken into in the middle of the night. People had come in through the roof, and the thieves had made off with $2.5 million worth of product in Bluebird palettes, Skin Frost palettes, and most importantly, an entire shade of his new concealer line.
And they took an entire shade of concealer.
And at the time, people were shocked and very sympathetic. This was obviously a huge hit for any brand to take. So when Jeffree announced that he was pushing the concealer launch back to May 2019, people were very happy to wait because they understood that the production line needed more time to get the new products out. Now, no one really questioned this at the time. There had been a very similar robbery in the same area of an Anastasia Beverly Hills warehouse in March of 2017. So the thieves in that case had done the exact same thing. They'd come in through the roof and they'd made off with $4.5 million worth of product. So it was perfectly feasible that the same thieves would strike again in a similar manner because it had been so successful the first time. However, there were a few bright-minded people who questioned whether the robbery was actually real after a few things didn't add up. So firstly, the ABH brand had never actually made a public statement like Jeffree's on their robbery. They'd let the LAPD handle it, and the LAPD had made public statements about the value of the robbery and published reports detailing what they were doing to investigate it and how the robbery had happened, whereas in Jeffree Star's case, he was the only person talking about it. So there was no statements made by the LAPD in the same way that they did for ABH, and it seems strange that the LAPD would make a public statement on one makeup robbery and not on another one when they're very similar and both worth millions of dollars. And it also seems strange how one random woman on Facebook had been given an image of a clearly either fake or unreleased product, and it had come from an unknown source, and she had started to sell it on Facebook Marketplace of all places. Like, if you knew you had illegally distributed products, would the first thing you think to do be post it on Facebook? Probably not. So someone actually did contact the LAPD in July 2020 asking for details on the robbery, and since none had ever been detailed publicly, no one really knew what the LAPD stance on this was, and the response from them detailed that the robbery was allegedly worth $10,000 of product and $20,000 in physical damage rather than the alleged $2.5 million that Jeffree had said it was worth. People defended Jeffree and said that it may be $10,000 worth of production value product, but actually it was going to be sold on for a lot more and it would have been worth $2.5 million. But I'm not really sure what the objective with that was or whether anyone actually did the maths, but that would mean that Jeffree had like a massive markup price, so probably not the best look for him. It would mean that for every $1 worth of production value he was making $250 in profit, which is quite a lot. So I don't think that that was the case. And anyway, D'Angelo Wallace explained this in a lot more detail, so I'll leave his video linked below. And to this day, Jeffree still maintains that the robbery happened and it was worth $2.5 million, but most people don't really believe this now because the evidence kind of points to it not being real because there isn't any evidence of it being $2.5 million. Like, people think it happened, but they think that it was very, very minor and that this was actually a publicity stunt, that they kind of amped it up to cause hype around the concealer launch so that more people would be interested in it. In the second Shane Dawson series, they actually mentioned the robbery. They filmed on the day that Jeffree told them it had happened, and they then also claimed that no leads had been found by the FBI, which seems weird because that woman on Facebook would have got that picture from somewhere, so why could she not direct them and then they could do their job and like find it? But I don't know, it seems like a bit of a cop-out way to get people to stop talking about it to me, is to say like, oh well, the FBI didn't find any leads, so if they can't find out who did it, then it's impossible to know. Okay, so next up, another 2019 scandal. This one comes in July. So one staple that the brand started to push out was the release of mystery boxes for holidays or special occasions such as Christmas, Halloween, Valentine's Day, stuff like that. And each release would always have 3 tiers, each one being more expensive than the last. So there would be like a mini one with like 3 products, a medium one with like 6 products, and then a large one with like 12. And I think the biggest one was like $100 and something. The medium one was like $70, and then the mini one was like $30, I think. So sometimes the boxes would contain exclusive products like lip colours, highlighters, or in one memorable case, stickers. But that's not what we're going to talk about right now. So the boxes were received pretty well on most occasions, although their launch in summer 2019 probably didn't go as well as the brand had probably expected, because people weren't overly positive about what they received in their mystery boxes. So people were firstly disappointed that one of the items in the mini box was a pop socket. So it had said that it would contain 3 items, and one of those was a pop socket. So if you were under the impression that you were going to receive 3 makeup items and then you received 2 makeup items and something to stick on the back of your phone, you probably would be a little bit disappointed. Like, they were still getting 2 lipsticks, so it was still a $36 value for the $20 that they paid, so technically they were still getting a good deal. It just wasn't as good of a deal as they were led to think it would be. And people also complained that a lot of the boxes in each tier contained the same products. So someone bought 2 of the medium tier and they received the exact same products in both, which kind of defeats the mystery part. Like, you may as well just tell people what's in the box and let them buy it, because there's no difference between each box. And the third common complaint was that the boxes only really contained the unwearable products, which I guess when you're buying from a brand that specialises in unwearable colours, you probably should expect that in a mystery box, which is a marketing tactic to get rid of products that aren't selling, you are going to receive at least one of the unwearable shades. They contained like the black highlighter or the gold lipstick, and they were probably the products that were sitting around unsold for a while, and the brand needed a way to get rid of them, so they shoved them in mystery boxes. But one particular colour, the gold lipstick, was released in 2017, and typically lipsticks have a shelf life of 2 years, and these mystery boxes came out in summer 2019, which meant that the brand could get rid of the lipsticks right before they expired, and then it would be the customer's problem once they did expire, because they were still in date when they bought them. And some people did complain that the lipsticks they received were broken or faulty. Some had the doe foot applicator missing. For example, one person had an oily lip ammunition, another one found glass in theirs, someone got a completely dried up lipstick. There were like a lot of different problems experienced across the board, so it was weird how there was a lot of small problems rather than like one big problem. Like with Jaclyn Hill's lipsticks, they were all consistently wrong in the same way, whereas with these ones they were all wrong in different ways. And the issue that affected the most amount of people was the lipsticks with condensation on them in the form of like little sweat bubbles, which was similar to Jaclyn Hill's, but this was assumed to be as a result of like the heat when they were being packed and when they were being transported, rather than an issue with the product themselves. This had already been established with Jaclyn's whole lipstick gate thing, that actually this wasn't a problem with shipping, not a problem with the products themselves, so they were still safe to use. And as you can tell, this launch wasn't a great look for the brand because people had so many complaints, but obviously it didn't do too much damage because Jeffree Star Cosmetics have released a lot of mystery boxes since then, and they always sell out, although they don't sell out as fast as they used to anymore. They used to sell out within literally like a minute, whereas now they'll kind of sit for maybe like 10-15 minutes before they sell out, but they're still selling out, so it doesn't really matter how long it takes them to get to that point. So the next scandal comes with the release of the Conspiracy Collection, which was a collaboration with Shane Dawson. There's an entire series about it if you are really interested and you want to watch it, but it was an eyeshadow palette, a mini palette, 6 lip glosses, a line of merchandise, and a few accessories like bags and mirrors. So the collection itself was huge. Shopify could not support the Jeffree Star Cosmetics website at the time of launch because there were so many people on there trying to get their hands on it, and there was apparently 1 million units of the palette sold within a very short space of time. And to all 1 million people who bought that palette, why? Like, I am genuinely interested in what people were drawn to about that colour story, because as soon as I saw it, I was like, this is odd. Like, none of these colours seem to match with each other, and I am genuinely interested because in my real life I have not met a single person who was interested in that palette or who has seen that and thought that that was a good product. So I just want to know what people were buying that for. Anyway, I'm not here to bash the colour story. I am here to bash the low quality of some of the products. So people reported receiving the palettes with bits of hair and bits of rubber glove in them. An issue that was like seemingly swept under the rug. There wasn't really a big public outcry about it. I think it only affected like maybe a few people out of the 1 million who bought palettes, and they handled it with those people privately rather than publicly, which is prevented it from becoming a massive scandal like Jaclyn Hill's lipsticks did. So people did take their concerns to social media with photos and video evidence. However, I think because there was so many people talking positively about the launch, the posts that were criticizing it got kind of buried under all the positive feedback, so it didn't blow up in the face of the brand the same way that it did with Jaclyn Hill Cosmetics. And I think also because it wasn't such a widespread problem as Jaclyn's was, I think it was they were very lucky that it wasn't, because Jeffree himself had been very outspoken against Jaclyn and how she hadn't handled things properly as a brand owner. So had this happened to him, it would have blown up in his face because he'd been so critical of her and her quality. So what people didn't let slide, however, was that the green lip gloss, which I think is called like slime glossing, started to form what looked like mold particles in it. Some people noticed that there was some kind of like black residue forming at the bottom of the lip gloss, and they were rightly concerned about what it might be. So the brand responded to people privately saying that it was lumps of pigment that were forming in the lip gloss and were settling in the same way that glitter would in a glitter lip gloss, and so there isn't any concern for like health or well-being of people who are using it, so carry on using it, just shake it well before. And a YouTuber called Kenna, who does skincare and science video, did a breakdown of the ingredients, and she said it's an oil-based product, so there is no opportunity for things like bacteria or mold to form once it's already been put in the tube, because there's no water in there, so it could not form any bacteria of its own accord once it's been packaged up.
The formula itself, I'll just pull that up right now. It is an oil-based formula, so there's no water in this formula. It doesn't need a traditional preservative system. It is just full of octyl dodecanol is a fatty alcohol. Ethyl cellulose is a polymer to make oils gel up. Trimethyl propane triisostearate is an ester. So again, these are all like fatty oils or fatty acids that come from vegetable oils. So it is an anhydrous system. It doesn't have any water present in the formulation. So it would be very difficult for anything like bacteria or mold to actually grow within this tube. And
she guessed that there was probably a big clump of pigment in like the big mixing tub thing that then kind of disintegrated into smaller bits and got put into each individual lip gloss, and that's why it was a problem for certain lip glosses and not for other ones. It depended which batch they'd come from, which batch had the big clump of pigment in. Obviously I can't tell you whether that's true or not, but she's the science expert, so I'm going to believe her. And this didn't become nearly as much of a scandal as Jaclyn Hill Cosmetics lipstick disaster did, and I think in part it was because the actual problem was perfectly explainable, but also it was handled privately with individuals who had problems rather than on Twitter like Jaclyn's was, which I think was a lesson that Jeffree and Shane were lucky to learn before their release, because Jeffree does have a habit of clapping back at people who criticise his brand on Twitter, and it could have blown up in his face if he had done the same as Jaclyn, but luckily Jaclyn did it first and it blew up in her face, so they didn't do that. However, it was pretty hypocritical that no statements were made publicly when Jeffree had been bashing Jaclyn for her lipsticks and her bad formulation, because what this comes down to in essence is that people paid $18 for a lip gloss. They would expected the formula to be good enough that the pigment could hold its own without breaking apart in the tube. And I have lip glosses with pigment in them, and I have never had this problem. I have never had bits of pigment break down in and settle at the bottom of my lip gloss, so I don't know whether this is like a problem with that particular pigment, whether it was the blue and the green in there that were more temperamental. I don't have any green lip glosses, so I don't know, but I think this was definitely a case of ignoring the problem and hoping it goes away, which it did, rather than making a statement and having to refund everyone who got one of those lipsticks if it was actually a problem. And Jeffree Star Cosmetics is no stranger to a wacky colour either, so I'm surprised that they would have these kind of problems with these like out there colours, because I would have expected that since they launched like a black lip gloss and a blue lip gloss before this, they would know how to handle pigment in coloured lip glosses. So I don't know if they just altered the formula for this particular release, whether they made it worse so it would be more profitable and then this happened, but I don't know. And one interesting thing that I found out when I was researching for this video was that Jeffree Star has actually had an issue with mouldy lip products before, and even if in this case it didn't turn out to be mold. So back in 2017, an Instagram user called JessMakeup0114 posted an image of a velour liquid lipsticks that she had bought from Beauty Bay, which showed that the lipstick had a big chunk of mold at the top that had obviously been growing for a while. Beauty Bay is a licensed retailer of Jeffree Star Cosmetics, so it was definitely a real product. So Beauty Bay made a statement and said that they are confident that the issue did not happen in their warehouse, so they basically implied that Jeffree Star Cosmetics was at the root of the problem. And this never became a big scandal. Jeffree never addressed it publicly, and I don't know if this was a one-time occurrence or there was multiple people who had this problem. The fact that Beauty Bay made a statement makes me think that there was multiple people who had this problem, probably with the same product, so potentially Jeffree Star Cosmetics was shipping out expired products or products that weren't up to standard to their customers and to their other warehouses and suppliers. And there was also evidence that there were problems with the lip ammunition formula when that first launched, based on reviews on Beautylish, where people said that the lipstick felt gritty or sandy, and images of the used lipsticks do not look healthy. Like, they appeared to be normal when you got them, but then once you used them they would go really gritty, which was the exact same problem that Jaclyn Hill had with her lipsticks. So I wonder whether they used the same lab to start off with and then Jeffree moved his, and that's why Jaclyn had the problem, is because they haven't learned from their first mistakes. But that's a conspiracy theory, so don't take my word on that. Most of the problems seem to be with one particular shade, which was Celebrity Skin, which has obviously since been reformulated, and I haven't seen any bad reviews of that since then. And again, this was not a huge scandal. I don't know if that's because the brand wasn't that big at the time, but either way, there wasn't much mention of this. Even when Jaclyn Hill was being dragged through the mud for her lipsticks that had the same problem, no one mentioned the fact that Jeffree Star had also had this problem a few years earlier. Okay, so finally we can make it out of 2019 and into 2020, which went just about as well as 2019. So the first major controversy took place in May, which was about a nice 6-month gap since the last drama, and this incident came with the release of the Cremated Palette. So the Cremated Palette was dubbed as one of the worst timed and most tone deaf releases in the industry so far, because it was a palette named after a process that happens after death, released during the middle of a global pandemic when a lot of people were dying unnecessarily because of said pandemic. Not the most tasteful launch, I must say, and people at the time were very unimpressed, and still are very unimpressed, because we still are in a global pandemic. A lot of people found the timing to be very disrespectful to people who died from the pandemic. It seemed like it was making light of death, and although Jeffree is known for his like dead behind the eyes look and his dark humour, this did overstep the line for a lot of people. Some people said maybe he had trademarked it. I think they looked and he trademarked it in September 2019, so perhaps the palettes had been in production and they needed to be sold, otherwise they would expire and then they'd have to be thrown out. I guess looking back at it now, he probably did want to release it then, because the pandemic has only got worse since then, so the palettes, if he'd have waited, they would have sat in storage and expired. But still, not the best name, could have just repackaged them into something else. A lot of fans weren't interested in this release as well, because it was the exact opposite of what they had grown to love Jeffree Star Cosmetics for, which was out there crazy colours, and this launch was, in a word, boring. This was the brand's largest palette in terms of like number of shades, and yet it offered absolutely nothing to the average makeup user. No one needs 30 shades of grey, especially not people of colour who couldn't even attempt to use 90% of those shades without them coming out super ashy, so this was not a great move for the brand. Jeffree was starting to fall out of public favour at this point as well, so he needed to come out with something amazing to get the brand back on its feet, and he just didn't. Now, 2020 only got worse from here, because just before all the Shane and Tati stuff happened, people who had worked with the brand started to come out and speak out against them, saying that they were inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement. So until then, Jeffree Star himself had been known as a racist, so that was just him, and he had said racist things on camera, but this hadn't really affected the Jeffree Star Cosmetics brand as such, because there'd been no allegations of racism against them, apart from people refraining to buy their products because of their association with Jeffree Star. But this kind of changed that. So a black beauty influencer called Cameron Lester spoke out first to say that himself and 4 or 5 other black boys in beauty had been removed from the Jeffree Star PR list without explanation before the release of the Conspiracy Palette, and he also said that he felt like Jeffree had only really kept him around brand to be the token black person to increase his diversity, rather than because Jeffree actually believed that they were friends. Like, he was just being used to show that Jeffree was like a changed person when actually he wasn't. He was just there to fill the diversity quota.
IG Live, Cameron said, quote, "I just felt like it was never a friendship with Jeffree. It was never a friendship in the beginning to start with. It was always just something like I was kind of like the token black kid."
And another influencer called Glow Daddy also came out and said that he was contacted by Jeffree. So Jeffree reached out to him to put him on the PR list, but then when he made looks with the products like every day, he always tagged the brand, he always used their products. They never gave him any recognition. They never liked his pictures, they never followed him. Well, I think they probably did follow him, so they didn't like his pictures and they never reposted any of his pictures, or they never commented on them. So he kind of felt like they'd put him on the PR list so that he would promote them, so that it would be like, oh look, we're a diverse brand, look at these black men doing beauty who want to use our brand. And then they never acknowledged his existence. So he felt like this was driven, he said, from some place, which kind of implies racism, but he didn't openly say, I think that this brand is racist. But he was a black man in beauty that Jeffree had acknowledged was very talented, and yet the brand was sending him PR that they didn't want to acknowledge he was using. And it seems weird to send people products for free and then not expect anything from them. Most of the time brands do that so that people can do looks with the products before they are released and grow hype around them and expose them to a bigger audience. So it seemed weird that they would send him those products and then not actually want to post his looks with those products. And he, alongside a bunch of other black men in beauty, were taken off the PR list without warning before the Shane Dawson launch. And I don't know why they would target this one specific demographic, unless either Jeffree didn't need them to make him look diverse anymore, or he knew the colours of the collection wouldn't work on their skin tones and he didn't want people to see that, or what. But for whatever reason, they were removed, and the brand was accused of systematic racism against black influencers, but also of using black influencers to fill a diversity quota rather than actually valuing them. Okay, so during the whole like drama with Shane, Morphe actually announced that they were cutting ties with Jeffree Star Cosmetics, which previously had been, like I said, had been sold in all of their stores since 2017, maybe 2018. And this meant that people outside of the USA would not be able to see any Jeffree Star products in person before purchasing from them from the website. So you had to just kind of rely on people on the internet to tell you what they were like before you spent your money on them. I don't know who benefited more from this business relationship, whether it was Morphe or Jeffree Star Cosmetics, but it was definitely a blow to JSC because it damaged their reputation in that one of the most shady and most controversial beauty brands no longer wanted to be associated with them. Like, Morphe by no means has a clean slate, and I made an entire video about Morphe. They were the first brand that I did in this series, so if you want to know what they did wrong, then you can go and watch that, it'll be linked in the description. But the fact that they didn't want to associate with Jeffree Star Cosmetics because it was too controversial says a lot. They themselves are scandal ridden, so you have to do something like really bad to get Morphe to drop you. Like, Jeffree hadn't necessarily been like a Morphe babe in the same way that like Laura Lee or Manya MUA had been, but he was obviously very closely tied with the brand, so the fact that they cut him off is quite interesting. And like, I don't want to dwell too much on this because there's not a lot to say, but I do think that this negatively affected how people outside of the YouTube bubble viewed the brand. And next up is the palette that must not be named. I'll put a picture of it on screen so you know which one I'm talking about, which was kind of controversial because of the inappropriate themes. A lot of parents of kids who are fans of Jeffree were angry that he was promoting these kind of ideals to their children and refused to let their kids buy the palette. And the main thing that I want to focus on here isn't the palette but the quality. So the mini palette was the subject of a lot of bad reviews, with people saying that the colours were coming off differently on the eye than on the like swatches and in the pan, and that the quality of themselves were not normal JSC quality. They were much worse than all the other shadows. And what I find interesting is that when I went to look for these reviews to find evidence for this video, since I very distinctly remember seeing them on Beauty Bay, the mini palette is not actually available to purchase on Beauty Bay anymore, despite the big palette still being on there. and it's also unavailable on the Jeffree Star Cosmetics website, where you can't actually view reviews. I just don't think, I couldn't see any reviews for it, so all of the bad reviews have essentially been deleted because that product is now gone from Beauty Bay's website for whatever reason. I don't know whether they saw the bad reviews and decided to discontinue the product entirely. Rather than face the backlash over the bad quality, they just decided to kind of take the quiet route and discontinue it without making a big statement about it because it wasn't a popular product in the first place. I don't know, but I just thought that was interesting to mention. And more generally, people criticised this launch for a lack of creativity. Again, it was 30 shades of matte nudes, and realistically no one needs to spend $59 on 30 matte nudes when you've probably already got all those colours in other palettes, and a lot of those shades seem like repeats of each other. And people were starting to get bored of Jeffree Star Cosmetics at this point. All their releases seemed to be less inspired than the last, and the brand was kind of losing its place in the market for being like the crazy colour brand. All other brands were doing that now. You could get multicoloured liquid lipsticks from places other than Jeffree Star Cosmetics, so people who maybe didn't want to support the brand but didn't have anywhere else to get their favourite colour lipstick now have other options, so might not choose Jeffree Star Cosmetics anymore. But also the brand seemed to be lacking in creativity. They'd had all the success of Blood Sugar and Thirsty, Alien, Blue Blood, and then they just done two basically monochrome palettes that no one really needed. Like, no one needs a huge palette with 30 shades of either grey or brown. Okay, so the final scandal of 2020 is that Jeffree Star Cosmetics is actually involved in another lawsuit, this time with the estate of Anna Nicole Smith, who, if you don't know, was a supermodel who died back in 2007, because Jeffree Star Cosmetics has been selling a lipstick in her signature red shade under the name Anna Nicole without the permission of her family members, which pretty disrespectful. They used the name of a very well-known public figure without the permission of any of her family members in order to entice more people to buy that product. So there's many potential shade names out there. They didn't need to use those two names, Anna Nicole, together, unless they were trying to profit off of Anna Nicole Smith. So I think it's perfectly justified for the family members to have an issue with that and to issue a lawsuit claiming for all the profits that JSC has made from that name. This lawsuit was only launched in October of 2020 and it's still ongoing, so obviously I can't tell you what the result of that is, but somehow this flew under the radar because I didn't know about this until I searched Jeffree Star controversy and this came up in one news article. There was no more news articles about it. I don't know whether it's just very private, like Anna Nicole's estate didn't want to make it public, but either way that's going on. But I guess when Jeffree Star is the face of your brand, you can probably get away with a lot of shady stuff because what Jeffree's doing in his personal life is a lot worse, and so people may pay more attention to that than what the brand is doing. So my final little section that I wanted to put in was about the fact that Jeffree is the face of the brand because he is the CEO, the founder, the creative director, the star of all the campaigns, and he does all the reveals on his own personal YouTube channel. So everything that the brand does is tied to him and vice versa. I think had there been less of an obvious and outright relationship between them, the brand might have been able to grow more and establish itself more as a brand rather than an offshoot of Jeffree Star, because as far as I've seen, most of their products have good reviews. They seem to be good quality, but people won't buy them because they don't want to put money in Jeffree's pocket. Like in every other brand that I have covered, most of the CEOs aren't involved, apart from with Kylie Cosmetics, because obviously she is the face of the brand and she is the reason why a lot of people bought from that brand, whereas with Jeffree Star, he's the reason that a lot of people don't buy from his brand. And a lot of allegations that are made against Jeffree reflect badly on the brand, such as those of racism, which discourage people from buying from them. Hello, so this was actually supposed to be the end of the original video, but there was one thing that I wanted to talk about that I forgot to put in my original script, and I have like half an hour of the house to myself, so I thought I would just film a little bit extra. So Jeffree Star's makeup is now actually available at TJ Maxx, which in the UK is TK Maxx, but we don't have Jeffree Star over here, so we don't get it in our TK Maxx.
Remember the time when Jeffree Star said TK Maxx is where all brands go to die? Well, hello there, TK Maxx.
Jeffree has filmed multiple videos where he has gone into a TJ Maxx and bought makeup from there, and it's a big thing because it's like, oh, big rich man going and buying cheap discounted makeup. And I think he actually said that TJ Maxx is the place where makeup brands go to die. So it's quite funny that his brand is now in TJ Maxx. I wonder who approved that, because obviously he's been very outspoken against makeup being in TJ Maxx, so that's an interesting point. I think it just shows like the brand is very much kind of declining in sales. Like their launches just aren't as exciting anymore. People aren't buying and like selling them out, so this is what they have to do to try and make money, is they have to sell to TJ Maxx. So that doesn't need like a lot of explanation. It's just something that I thought funny because Jeffree's made entire videos about how you shouldn't shop for makeup at TJ Maxx or how embarrassing it is to be a makeup brand in TJ Maxx, so I just thought that was something that was worth a mention. That is all that I have for today. This was a really long video. My script was nearly 5,000 words and I had to plan the entire thing in 4 hours last night because I realised that I was one video short for while I was out at uni and I had to film something before I leave tomorrow. So you can't really see it, but my room is a mess behind me right now because it's just full of clothes and stuff that I need to take back with me. So thank you if you have made it this far, because now I feel like it was worth it. If you did enjoy, then be sure to leave a like, leave a comment with any thoughts that you might have, and subscribe to see more videos like this. I will link the playlist of all of my other Everything Wrong With videos in the description down below, so you can go and watch more of them if you are interested, along with my most recent videos, so if you want to go and check them out. And I will hopefully see you guys in the next one. Bye guys!